In this story, when you hear this, turn the page.
A Thundercat Adventure. The Invisible Castle. Growl of Warning. A powerful cat-like growl thundered from the sword chamber of the cat's lair, home of the Thundercats on Third Earth. Hearing it, Lion-O, the leader of the Thundercats, moved swiftly to open the sword chamber door. The door swung open. Lion-O blinked, half-blinded, as dazzled light met his eyes. When they adjusted, he entered the sword chamber and went directly to the source of the sound and the light, the Sword of Omens. The sword was Lion-O's servant in battle, but at times like this, it was his master, summoning him with its thunderous growl. The sword was growling loudly. The eye of Thundera was ablaze with light. Lion-O picked up the sword and gazed into the all-seeing eye. He saw a strange castle of crystal, surrounded by a silvery, mirror-like moat. Then the castle faded, and a prison cell took its place. In the center of the cell was a tiny, wizened creature. Light seeped through his skin, as if his flesh were no more solid than smoke. But the long claws on his hands and feet were real enough. So were his 3 green glowing eyes, and his cloak studded with jewels of the same glowing green. There was another figure in the cell. Lion-O recognized him with dismay.
Jaga!
Jaga was the wisest of all Thundercats, the one on whom all the other Thundercats depended in times of doubt and indecision. But now, it was Jaga who needed help. The creature who had chained him to the wall crowed,
I have planned this moment for years. I, Nemex, warden of the astral prison, have you, Jager, as my prisoner for all eternity.
Lion-O growled. Sword in hand, he raced out of the room.
Thundercats, assemble in the council chamber room immediately!
He roared. The other Thundercats, Panthro, Tigra, Chitara, Snarf, even the mischievous Wily Kit and Wily Cat raced for the council room. But his words had another effect as well, an effect Lion-O certainly did not intend, and could not suspect. Witch's Brew. In a distant part of Third Earth, lightning played around the Black Pyramid of Mumra. It penetrated to its core, where the tomb of Mumra was hidden. Roused from his endless sleep of undying evil, the hideous figure of Mumra emerged and shuffled to the bubbling cauldron nearby.
That bolt of warning lightning was most powerful,
he muttered.
What are those cursed Thundercats up to now?
Looking into the steam rising from the cauldron, he could see a picture of the Thundercats gathered in their lair. His ancient eyes gleamed. What evil could he work on them? Lion-O surveyed the other Thundercats gathered round the council table, waiting for him to speak. Tigra, cool and clear-headed, carrying the weighted whip that was his favorite weapon. Chitara, beautiful, bold, and swift, gifted with second sight and armed with her magic staff. Panthro, the strongest and the hottest-tempered, like a volcano always ready to erupt. Wily Kit and Wily Cat, young and sometimes foolish, but always ready to do their part in battle with their lariats and smoke pellets. And last and most lovable, Snarf, as brave as he was bumbling. Lion-O announced,
Jaga has been captured. He's a prisoner in a castle in the astral world.
The astral world?
Said Wily Kit in a puzzled voice.
The astral world is the invisible world that Jaga lives in,
said Lion-O.
It is as close to us as the air against our skins, yet as distant as the farthest reaches of space.
How do you find it if you can't see it?
Asked Wily Kit.
Is there a map or something?
Added Wily Cat.
I wish there were,
said Lion-O.
Even more, I wish I had the wisdom of Jaga to guide me to it.
He turned to Chitara.
Maybe your second sight can help me.
Chitara's eyes narrowed.
It's no use. I can pick up vibrations from things in this world,
but not in the other one.
There is someone, or maybe I should say something, who knows much about the astral world, said Tigra thoughtfully.
Who is it?
Asked Lion-O. The Nether Witch, said Tigra.
Ugh,
Said Wily Kit.
who would go to her?
If it were the only way to save Jaga,
Said Lion-O.
I'd go to the devil himself.
Mumra rubbed his twisted hands together in glee.
So, Lion-O wants to see the Nether Witch. So he shall. Ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form into Mumra, the ever-living!
As he spoke, his appearance changed, but he was not yet finished.
And now, the sorceress of the Netherworld!
And in place of Mumra stood the ravishing, green-eyed Nether Witch, Grand Mistress of Black Magic.
Lion-O won't know that Mumra and the Nether Witch are one and the same.
She laughed softly.
Until it's too late.
The Jaws of Danger. Lion-O got out of the thunder tank and looked out over the swirling river of despair. Beyond the river was the pit of the Nether Witch.
I have a hunch the mutants are planning trouble. Be on your guard.
Don't worry about us. We'll be ready if they try anything.
Said Panthro, sitting at the controls of the thunder tank.
Worry about yourself. Are you sure you want to see the Nether Witch alone? I'll gladly go with you.
You're needed to help defend the cat's lair.
Said Lion-O.
The Sword of Omens will give me all the help I need.
And with the sword, he motioned for the thunder tank to depart. Smiling, he waved goodbye as it roared away. But his smile faded as he turned to face the river between him and the pit of the Nether Witch. There's just one way across, he thought with a shudder. The Bridge of Slime. The bridge looked like a huge bent tree trunk, but it was not made of wood. It was made of a substance as smooth as ice and covered by a dripping coat of slime. This is a job for the claw shield, thought Lion-O. The shield was an ingenious glove-shaped device tipped with metal claws. He lay stomach down on the bridge with his legs dangling down on either side. He dug the claw shield into the bridge and pulled himself forward. Halfway across, the monstrous head of a gaw rak-rak emerged from the water, its huge jaws snapping a few inches from his dangling feet. Lion-O reached for his sword. The claw shield lost its grip, and he began sliding off the bridge into the jaws of the ravenous beast. Desperately, he plunged the Sword of Omens into the bridge so that it stuck straight out of the side. Gripping the sword, he swung back and forth while the sharp-toothed jaws below snapped and snarled in futile pursuit of his swinging feet. With a final mighty heave, Lion-O swung himself back onto the bridge. He retrieved the sword and resumed his progress toward the safety of the shore. The Sword of Omens growled.
Don't worry, Sword.
Lion-O said.
I know I have to be on the lookout for danger when I go down into the pit of the Nether Witch.
But Lion-O did not suspect what kind of danger was waiting for him, nor what kind of danger was threatening all the other Thundercats. A pair of perils. The ugly sound of loud mutant laughter rang off the walls of the fortress called Castle Plundar. Here, Slithe, Jackalman, Monkeyan, and Vultureman, bitter enemies of the Thundercats, were congratulating themselves. They were in Vultureman's workshop, inspecting the weapon they had helped him build.
Splendid work,
said Slithe.
A thunderanium cannon, able to shoot thunderanium shells. Thunderanium! The only thing that can weaken those dratted Thundercats!
Said Vultureman. His beady eyes glittered as he gazed at the 4 rapid-fire barrels of the new cannon. Right next to it was stacked a towering supply of brightly colored Thundranium shells.
I can't wait to fire them into the cat's lair,
exulted Monkeyan. Vultureman patted the cannon.
This is our greatest chance ever to destroy them once and for all, especially since Lion-O won't be there to defend them with his cursed sword. Yes,
said Slithe.
Mumra has told us. At this very minute, Lion-O is walking into his trap.
Slithe was wrong. Lion-O was not walking into Mumra's trap. He was sliding into it, down the sloping sides of the pit of the Nether Witch. Sliding out of control, he hit the bottom of the pit and lay there stunned. Groggily, he got to his feet and pulled out the Sword of Omens.
Guide me, sword,
he said. Light shot from its tip, and he saw the entrance to a tunnel. Lion-O entered, with the sword lighting his way. Suddenly, he was grabbed by a three-eyed demon, which hurled him into a gaping hole that yawned at his feet. He fell, and fell, and fell, and then nothingness. When he came to, he was still clutching the Sword of Omens, but the beautiful green-eyed woman who stood looking down at him showed no fear of it. She smiled.
So, Lord of the Thundercats, you want to enter the astral world to free Jaga.
How did you know that?
I am the Nether Witch. I know everything.
Unsteadily, Lion-O faced her. He felt the force coming from this raven-haired sorceress, but he could not afford to break contact.
Will you help me? Can you get me into the astral world?
Of course, dear Lion-O. But once you are there, you can never return. Choose now, or lose your chance forever.
The Nether Witch spat out.
I have to free Jaga.
This is the only way to do it.
Lion-O hesitated. How could he trust this creature? But Jaga's freedom was at stake.
I will go,
said Lion-O. The voice of the Nether Witch rose in a cackle of triumph.
Ancient spirits of the void, transport Lion-O to the astral world!
As she spoke, the form of Lion-O faded, and as he faded, the Nether Witch changed. The last thing Lion-O saw before he vanished from Third Earth was the form of Mum-Ra, the ever-living, taking the place of the Nether Witch. I've been tricked, he thought. Astral action! Lion-O found himself standing at the edge of the silvery moat that surrounded the crystal castle he had seen in the eye. The castle was in the middle of a desert that stretched to the horizon on all sides. Lion-O took his claw shield from his belt. He aimed the shield at the castle and pulled the trigger. A line with a claw at its tip sped through the air and hooked onto the top of the castle wall. Lion-O swung himself across the moat and began to haul himself up the outside of the wall. Moments later, he was standing on the castle parapet, looking down the steep crystal stairway that led inside the castle. Lion-O had to descend the stairs one careful step at a time, for the strange light of the astral world made it impossible to see whether they slanted sharply or shortened suddenly. When he reached the bottom, his path was even more bewildering. The crystal corridors that he moved through looked perfectly straight, but he quickly found that they swerved right and left and up and down. Lion-O bumped into wall after wall. His feet stumbled. His senses swam. Then, from behind a locked door, in a corridor lined with locked doors, he heard a voice that stopped him in his tracks. And when he looked in through the window that was set in that door, what he saw made his blood boil.
When the music stops, turn your cassette over.
Fight for freedom. Nemex, warden of the astral prison, was just as hideous in person as he had looked in the eye of Thundera. Tiny and wizened, he had claws on his hands and feet, and a rasping voice that snarled at Jaga.
Only when you surrender all your knowledge will I consider freeing you.
Jaga's aged muscles were not strong enough to break the chains that bound him to the cell wall, but the strength of his ageless spirit was as strong as ever.
Never will I give that knowledge to you, Nemex,
he replied. Nemex laughed scornfully.
Brave words, feeble fool. But I, Nemex, master of all who are captive in the astral world, have eternity to change your mind. And my poor Jaga, you can be sure I have the means to do it.
Nemex's laughter rose even higher until a voice from outside the cell rose above it.
Not if I have anything to do with it, Nemex.
Who dares?
Nemex began, then saw Lion-O's angry face through the cell door window. For a split second, Nemex shrank back. Then his voice swelled.
You think you can overcome me, intruder? I will make you see differently.
As he spoke, green beams of light shot out from his eyes, and his body shot up, doubling in height. In answer, Lion-O ran full force at the cell door and crashed through, to find himself facing a massively muscled, cruelly smiling giant. Lion-O ducked the green beams, shooting from Nemex's eyes.
Try again, Nemex,
mocked Lion-O.
I will, and this time I'll get you!
Screamed Nemex, his huge arms thrust out toward Lion-O, and the long claws on his fingers pointed straight at Lion-O's heart. Roared Nemex, and 10 beams of yellow light shot from his fingers. Jaga shouted from where he was chained.
The Eye of Thundera, Lion-O! Use its power!
His words came not a moment too soon. Lion-O had just time to raise the Sword of Omens in front of him, holding it so that the Eye of Thundera shielded his heart. Shrieked Nemex in agony as the 10 bright beams turned into one blinding shaft of light in the Eye of Thundera came blazing back at him. His body shriveled back to its former pitiful size. Lion-O stepped forward and lifted the tiny Nemex into the air. Hissing, Nemex tried to claw his way loose, but his feeble attempts only made Lion-O's grin wider.
Thank you for saving me once again with your wisdom. Now it is my turn to save you.
With his free hand, Lion-O snapped the chains that bound Jaga to the wall. Then, tossing Nemex like a rag doll into a corner of the cell, Lion-O used both hands to tear apart the chains around Jaga's wrists and ankles.
You'll never get away with this,
croaked Nemex from the corner.
Guess it's time to say goodbye, Nemex,
said Lion-O as he and Jaga headed out through the shattered door.
I'll lead the way,
said Jaga. The tricks that the astral light played could not trick him.
With you in charge, we'll be out of this castle in no time,
said Lion-O.
But even I don't know how to get you out of the astral world,
Jaga told him.
I, who am more spirit than flesh, can return to Third Earth with ease when I am needed. But you have not yet reached that higher state of being.
We'll worry about that later,
Lion-O said.
First we have to escape the guards.
They quickened their pace, running at full speed through the maze of corridors. Then came a sound. The one sound that could stop them. The sound of a voice crying, "Help me!" The Eye of Doom. The voice came from behind a locked door, which Lion-O blasted open with a beam from his sword. Cautiously, he and Jaga entered the room, fearing a trap. But they relaxed when they saw who had called out to them. He was ancient beyond calculation. His long red hair and immense tangle of red beard had gone countless years without cutting. Only one eye remained to him, but though dim, it shone with joy when he saw Lion-O and Jaga.
Rescued at last,
he said in a quavering voice.
Thank you, my boy. I will reward your kindness.
Lion-O smiled at the idea of this frail figure helping him. Then his smile faded as he heard the distant shouts of approaching guards. Lion-O swept the ancient man up in his arms, and he and Jaga ran for their lives.
This way,
said Jaga, and led them into a pitch-dark corridor. Light from Lion-O's sword showed that the sides and roof were beaded with drops of water.
We're in a tunnel under the moat,
said Jaga.
It's our only way out.
You mean it was our only way out?
Said Lion-O, as the light beam shone on a wall that blocked off the tunnel. The light from the sword changed to a laser beam, and the wall crumbled away.
Easy as pie,
said Lion-O.
Except for one thing,
said Jaga, and he pointed upward. Cracks were spreading through the tunnel ceiling.
The wall must have acted as a support,
said Lion-O.
Run,
commanded Jaga. They leapt over the rubble and dashed down the tunnel. Behind them came the roar of water rushing through the collapsing ceiling. Then, ahead of them, a dot of light appeared, growing larger with every racing step. Their last steps were taken sloshing through water. They flung themselves out of the tunnel and lay panting by the exit. The tunnel came out behind a rock, which shielded them from view of the castle.
Nemex will figure we drowned.
Lion-O said.
We're safe for a while, at least.
Then the Sword of Omens began to growl.
Or maybe we aren't. Let's see how close the danger is.
He looked into the eye of Thundera. But the danger he saw was painfully far away, on Third Earth, at the cat's lair. The mutants were attacking the cat's lair with their Thundranium cannon.
Check the Thundranium level.
Tigra told Wily Kit, who had the Thundranium counter.
It's 129, rising fast.
Reported Wily Kit.
If it rises much higher, we're done for,
said Tigra.
We must knock out that cannon,
said Panthro.
I'm going after it.
He pressed the starter of the Thunder Tank.
Up and at him,
he shouted, heading out to where the mutant menace waited.
If anyone can do it, he can,
said Wily Cat. But Wily Kit said what all the Thundercats were thinking.
If only Lion-O and the Sword of Omens were here.
Help! Vulture Man waited as Panthro came at him in the Thunder Tank. Expertly, he spun the controls of the Thundranium cannon and pressed its firing button. One after another, the 4 cannon barrels pumped shells into the Thunder Tank. It shuddered and veered out of control, finally tipping over on its side. Jackal Man flew down in his sky cutter, guns blazing, as Panthro crawled from the wrecked Thunder Tank.
Now for the kill!
Jackal Man cried. But using his enormous muscle power for a lightning-fast zigzag run to the cat's lair, Panthro evaded Jackal Man's bullets.
I'll get him next time!
Jackal Man snarled.
He'll never make it back to the lair. Besides, soon there won't be a cat's lair to go back to.
In the astral world, Lion-O lowered the eye of Thundera. He could stand to watch no more.
The cat's lair is being destroyed, and I'm stuck here.
He groaned.
Are you sure you can't get me back to Third Earth, Jaga?
Jaga shook his head.
Then no one can help me, or any of the other Thundercats.
Lion-O said despairingly.
I can help you.
Lion-O turned to the frail ancient man he had rescued.
You? How could you help me?
My name is Brodo,
the Ancient One said.
Centuries ago, I was the greatest magician on Third Earth. My wizardry threatened Mum-Ra's evil power. He disguised himself as the beautiful Nether Witch, tricked me, and trapped me in the astral prison.
Sounds familiar,
said Lion-O.
Inside the prison walls, I was powerless. But now, my powers have returned,
Brodo said.
You can be my instrument of vengeance on him and his mutant allies, if you're willing to do battle with them.
I'm more than willing,
said Lion-O.
Then get your sword ready for action,
said Brodo.
And prepare your spirit as well,
said Jaga.
Right,
said Lion-O. He felt the power of the sword in his hand, and he felt a different kind of strength as well, a strength that filled his innermost being. Brodo pointed his fingers at Lion-O.
Ancient spirits of good,
he cried.
Transport Lion-O back to his own world.
The astral world vanished, and Lion-O was moving with meteoric speed through vast empty space. Sword in the sky.
It's all over,
gasped Chitara weakly as the laser gun fell from her hand. The Thundranium smoke filling the fortress room of the cat's lair had done its evil work. It had sapped the strength of the Thundercats and left them powerless. The mutants were closing in for the kill. But suddenly, all fighting stopped as Lion-O and the Sword of Omens appeared in the sky above the battlefield. The strength of new hope filled the Thundercats as they watched Lion-O and the sword slowly descend to Earth. Lion-O hurled the sword directly at Vulture Man's cannon. There was an ear-splitting bang as it met the nose of an emerging shell. All that remained of the mighty cannon was a heap of jagged, twisted metal. Gleaming on top of it, completely unharmed, lay the Sword of Omens. As Lion-O went to retrieve it, he was cut off by Slithe in the nosediver. The powerful guns aimed directly at him. But Panthro came to Lion-O's rescue with the awesome explosive pellets that were his favorite weapon.
Got to get away,
muttered Slithe, and he turned his nosediver straight into a cloud of choking black smoke. He did not see the crater he drove into until he hit the bottom. But Monkeyan and Jackalman, in their sky cutters above, could see it all. The Thundercats were back in fighting form.
Let's get out of here!
The two mutants cried, but Chitara had already hurled her magic staff at Jackalman's sky cutter. The staff flew through the air. Jackalman had only time to gasp,
"Hana! Hana!"
before the staff hit his sky cutter and sent it into a twisting tailspin. The craft smashed into a treetop and hung in pieces from the branches. Jackalman climbed out and jumped to the ground. Whimpering, he staggered to his feet and started to run. Monkeyan had no better luck when he tried to dodge the bola whip that Tigra hurled up at him. Balls of fire flared from the bola's tips as they hit the mutant's sky cutter. A minute later, the sky cutter's nose was buried in the ground, and a gibbering Monkeyan was limping away. Hooray for Team Thundercat! Lion-O, sword in hand, stood with the other Thundercats and watched the pitiful figures of the mutants scurrying away.
They'll think twice before attacking the cat's lair again,
He said triumphantly.
If they had any brains to think with, they wouldn't have tried it at all,
Said Tigra with a grin.
They must have thought that Lion-O and the sword wouldn't be here to save us.
Said Chitara.
Thank you, Lion-O.
It's I who should thank you for saving me.
Said Lion-O, and the Sword of Omens growled in agreement. Then they heard a voice. Jaga's voice.
"That is the way to win.
He said.
Not fighting alone, but as a team."
Lion-O and the other Thundercats nodded solemnly. With Lion-O leading the way, they formed a circle and raised their clasped hands high. "Hooray for Team Thundercat!" shouted Wily Cat.
Hooray for us all!
Wily Kit echoed. And Lion-O knew that Jaga, from wherever he watched over them, was cheering too.